Hiya, let's talk about Mo Astray, a puzzle platformer released in 2019. Mo Astray is, well, first of all, it's a direct and low-maintenance title. It says clearly, in a friendly and audible voice, "Hello, I am pleased to meet you." Polite and unassuming, but maybe not the most informative thing. I mean, hard to have an adventure where nobody gets lost. It's just part of the territory. I guess that just leaves Mo, which is an okay place to start. Well, Mo is this mascot-shaped jelly man here. He's got movement with the generally cute and pleasing touches you expect. Every little hop comes with a little jingling bell sound effect. He makes fun faces that match his squeezes and shapes. He puffs up amusingly when he sits on people's heads, right before he rips them off. He's basically Carry-On, but more relatable and a Pokemon. That answers the what, but flubber eating zombies is at least half of the way to another what already. And that what is why? Well, to answer that, let me introduce my good friend Spoilers. We'll do a quick appetizer round of spoilers, we'll get into some game mechanics, and I'll warn you before we get into the big reveals. Awakening in a haze of pixels and particles, our hero was propelled forward by a disembodied voice into an overgrown complex of space-age technology. Interesting thing about space-age technology, the thing that makes it space-age is when it's not exactly clear what it does, aside from create incredible danger. Like here, I'm just gonna click to a random part of my footage. I got this one. What does this do? They have like an industrial-grade lawsuit generator. Answers to those questions aren't immediately forthcoming. Our hero has no memory. Without words, it's impossible to ask for clarification from the voice, whose only focus is some kind of mission. So the cause of the mess everywhere will be up for player discovery. This is done by hopping onto domes, which lets you steer people into puzzle-solving range, or optionally, read their entire existence boiled down into a handful of words. I like it. This approach to world building is in vogue these days. You know, the more a player looks, the more they learn about their surroundings. It's engaging and it rewards curiosity. It's also kind of fun because it allows you to make of the world your very own guinea pig. So the breadcrumbs we pick up in this first area are a bunch of oblique references to the consequences of some manner of thing that stranded people here and was either very, very bad or good, but based on confusing criteria. That's interesting, but it's a little bit at odds with my immediately following statement, which is, at the close of every chapter, we're given a fully illustrated flashback to a few events in the past. Sorry for this brief and unscheduled detour to Opinion Town, but I just wasn't a fan. My guess is that this is because the localization sometimes missed for me. Or also maybe because they just hit me in my cliché bone. I don't want to tell anybody how to do their whole science thing, but when the Galactic Inquisitor comes and expresses concern about the project you're heading, maybe don't make a show of ominously adjusting your glasses and defending it as intoxicating. Do you even hear yourself? If you're in a hurry and you got somewhere to be, my fresh, hot, unfiltered take is that the game's story is kind of at odds with its presentation and it undercuts itself in the first bit here, which ruins the drama just a little bit. But this is secondary, so we're not going to get back to it until later, if I remember it all. Speaking earlier, I compared Mo to Carrion, but the movement system in this game is not as fluid or free form as that. It's more traditional platformer fare, with the key difference being that at any time you plot your jumps with the thumbsticks. The practical upshot of this is that it gives you more gradients of control with your jumps. And also, I guess it would let you brag about having finished a game without ever actually touching a face button. The ladies would love that one, I'm sure. Mo interacts with surfaces like water, sliding down them after a certain amount of time. He's not capable of climbing upwards on any surface. Jumps within a few degrees of any plane you're stuck to are disallowed. This means that climbing upwards in the early parts of the game without double jump is usually not intended or only for the very unconventionally inclined. The early pre-double jump puzzles are all about placing things with switches and operating cranes. They're not the most engaging thing. Thankfully, things do pick up, and the end of the game is noticeably faster. Noticeably. I'm talking clinically observable in sterile conditions with lab equipment, okay? Absolutely empirical. If I showed you the last few areas, you wouldn't even really recognize it as the same game. You would be confused, disoriented, you'd probably say something like, "Oh, that's the same game, but it's going a lot faster now." I think based on the way this is advertised on Steam, the contrast might be a turnoff for some people. I've even seen the early part described as ponderous. So there's a note, maybe not the strongest foot forward. I will say though, that second foot forward, that foot's alright with me. I get along with that second foot. That second foot likes to go fast. It's got a Healy and a trampoline. It's a good hang and it seems mostly interested in having fun. Variety is something that sometimes is lacking in indie games, but this one has it and an approach to it that just seems to say, well, why not? Why not rewatch Mad Max? Shit, bro, bring me the popcorn. Why not be a balloon? I mean, I like to see things from up high. Sure. I like it, and I'm here for it. Sadly, there's no foot on earth that has only good ideas. I'm probably going to abandon this metaphor now because it doesn't make as much sense in this context. I prefer platformers on a faster pace, and this is not 100% that. This is largely puzzles. I will say that the puzzles in this game check off a line item on my list. And that line item is, I wasn't able to just move my hands repeatedly at the puzzles until they solved themselves. This is a pretty low bar to be able to vault, but in some games where the puzzles don't really get given the effort, you can just sort of sleepwalk your way through them. They're not all whoppers, but what can you do? They're trying to do this world building thing at the same time. And in several cases the solution was so goofy that I just had to enjoy it in spite of myself. As I understand it, this is made by a team straight out of college, which is really impressive. When I was in college, the only thing I made was my parents disappointed. This information makes me very excited to see how the sequel improves, because there are a couple of things that I expect will probably get streamlined to tremendous effect. One of those things is the movement. This is just my theory here, but I wonder if the different movement system is really fully utilized as a strength. Since the player can jump at any angle, they have full freedom of approach. This gives you options like upside down levels and sideways levels, and also tighter spaces, things that might be too restrictive if you only have one shape to your jump. But 2D platforming is such an old and well-trodden format that having one shape to the jump arc has not stopped it from exploring these schemas. For example, upside down levels, no problem, just invert the gravity, with any number of things like a machine that reverses gravity, or fancy shoes, or a stage that takes place near a fat person, I don't know. There's no doubt a couple of places in this game where the freedom of motion alchemizes something that I can really appreciate. But usually just as soon as that shows up, it's gone. Really, as it is when you compare it against other platformers, the movement system almost takes a little bit away from it, simply because it seems like the game starts on a slower note to introduce players to it and get them comfortable with it. I think there's a certain amount of retraining you have to do, especially if you're used to being able to adjust your jump arc mid-air in other games. Here's the thing that took me the longest to adjust to. Forward momentum beyond your jump arrow dies off significantly faster than you would expect. Probably so that you were actually required to keep changing directions and feel that speed that seems to have been an objective for the developers here. And for whatever reason, maybe it's because in my brain I had that muscle memory of just always holding forward when I jump in other games, I just couldn't get it. Here's how I know when something really ticks me off, when it gives me an idea for an insane scheme. When I was writing this review, I briefly considered studying physics to see if I could prove if I was right or the game was right. And then I remembered that when I was in high school, I did take physics, and I was on the way to earning the world's most, Ripley's believe it or not, uppercased F. Would have done it too, but the teacher was too nice to fail me, and so she gave me a pity C. Really, in a perfect world, I'd like to see another game from these folks take off running at the beginning the way the end of this one does. Sort of the same way Ori and the Blind Forest went from slowly introducing skills over a series of hours to allowing you to do this in the first hour and a half of the second game. And avoid some of the puzzles that just sort of end up feeling like speed bumps. Speaking of speed bumps, that brings us to big spoils. The story of this game, as I think I mentioned, has a lot of stuff for you to look around and find for yourself, so the optimal place for enjoying it, I think, is probably just all the way in as opposed to part way. So that's your warning to decide if you want to get in there right now or listen to the rest. So the compound in the experiment we were previously discussing is a new form of energy called extremergy, which right away tells you that there are no heroes in this story. So in the first stage, all the memories are about people throwing things into experiments for some reason, and we can conclude the experiments must somehow involve either changing people or moving their minds around based on the puzzles in the area, and more concretely on the fact that some of the monsters seem to have been former human children. Shortly after this, the prologue confirms that the initial goal of all this was making space more kick-ass with lasers and immortality or something. As we climb, we bump into a side plot that's going on, where basically a bunch of cavemen are wondering why space people are shooting space lasers at their rocks. This explains the rampant experimentation in the first chapter somewhat. The first experiment, from the prologue you remember, created a sort of problem with the spaceship. Specifically, it caused it to no longer be in space, and so they're trying to go home. Naturally, the best way to fix an experiment is with another experiment. As it went though, I just found myself losing interest more and more, And that's probably because even though this is set up as an open book for people to dig into, a lot of the things I found were just not really load-bearing prose. I really more just started thinking to myself, maybe not every single platform needs to be a person with thoughts for me to read. Maybe some of them can just be quiet like a corpse should be. If things keep up like this, I will end up dead. Oh good, everything adds up here then. This is why I say the presentation is at odds with the actual story that's being told. It seems like they kind of leaned into the writing aspect of the story when they could have just as easily done more show. I'm not saying always show, never tell. I'm just saying maybe in this case tell is not a strength. But part of that could be localization or translation, and even if it isn't, I think this is highly subjective, right? Probably I just have a much more aggressive filter than other people when it comes to stuff like this. It just doesn't take very many words for the guy up here, the guy sorting through all the words, to be a real asshole about things, and go on like big productions and overly dramatic stuff like, "My king, I found the note left behind by the video game skeleton. His last words were, 'I do not want to die. And I have come to request from you 3 ships. Why? In the new world, I may find a to give.'" And that's something I have to work on. Not today, but eventually. Final thoughts? The price is right, and it's interesting. I'd give it a shot. Until next time.